Brian Zuliger. I'm an assistant professor in HPP, Human Performance and Physical Education, and I'm introducing Brian Glassey today. He's going to talk to you about eating disorders in male athletes. Brian.
All right, so like I said, it's understanding eating disorders, disordered eating in elite male athletes. So why am I interested? There seems to be, at least in my experience, not a real conversation around male athletes and disordered eating. It's kind of not talked about. It is a potential issue in my sport of track and field. It's just something that I think is out there, but like I said, people don't really talk about it. And nutrition and recovery is extremely important for athletes, and this is an issue that could impede that. And I want to eventually coach and deal with athletes at the highest level, and this is something that would be important. Again, the reason I'm interested is it seems like there's a different approach for male and female athletes revolving around disordered eating. It's just often assumed in society that men don't have weight issues or body issues. However, there's this vocabulary about fitness, leanness, muscle gains in sport, which shows that body image is definitely a topic. And another thing is injuries in males and females are kind of approached differently, just from a societal standpoint. For instance, if an athlete has a stress fracture, which is if you're exercising a lot, you might overwork a bone and cause a hairline fracture in it. And with female athletes, often the first question is, was that athlete eating right, or was their nutrition fine? And with the male athlete, with the same injury in the same circumstances, someone might say, oh, is that athlete overworking, or did they do something too extreme for that bone? And so again, we're talking about elite athletes, so just athletes at the top of their field, mostly college and professional athletes. And just to give some basic background facts, eating disorders among athletes, it's higher among athletes than the general population. It's typically higher in female athletes than in male athletes, but I want to talk about why that is according to maybe some research flaws, I think. And for women, disorders are highest in athletic sports, so that's diving or gymnastics, sports where their bodies are going to be viewed. And for men, it's typically highest in endurance and weight class sports where being lean can gain the athlete an advantage. Disordered eating, as defined by the American Psychiatric Association, they list 3 eating disorders: anorexia nervosa, which is basically just not eating enough intentionally to lose weight or be skinny, but which I think it's 15% less than what your BMI should be on the BMI index. Bulimia nervosa is if an athlete is vomiting or taking laxatives or something to purge what they've eaten, or not an athlete, but anyone. And binge eating disorder is eating a large amount all at once, and typically there's a lot of shame and guilt revolving around that. And some of the studies I looked at, they mentioned what they called anorexia athletica, which is similar to bulimia or anorexia, where an athlete they'll eat a normal amount, but they'll exercise so much so as to get rid of those calories. So what I think are some problems with current definitions is they're pretty narrow. They only, like I said, they might only take into account a certain BMI or body weight, and not get the full range of someone who's maybe dissatisfied with their body. And they fail to consider maybe restrictive or unhealthy diets. So someone might be eating an adequate amount of calories, but maybe they're on a ketogenic diet or something where they're only eating, say, meats or proteins, and they're having extremely restrictive diets that are harming them. And it might not take into account sport specificity. So that's where, maybe, like for instance, you would see the athlete on the right and think, oh, they're more at risk for an eating disorder than the athlete on the left, just based off of their body type or body size. But you don't know that, maybe the athlete on the right is eating healthily and the athlete on the left, could be having a restrictive or unhealthy diet. So some of the problems with current research, I felt were they mainly over the years, last 20, 30 years have focused on female athletes in aesthetic sports. And so you're counting out a lot of the athlete population when you do that. Also problems with diagnosis, or when doing these research, how they diagnose athletes with disordered eating, is they often use measures of amenorrhea and bone density. So that's where a female athlete, if they're not eating enough, or a female in the general population, they'll have a disturbed menstrual cycle. And so by using that measure, you're discounting half the population when you're trying to do these studies. There are also some, and that's referred to as the female athlete triad. And then so there's also some language issues. A lot of the language is female oriented, which causes some problems in trying to get adequate data. And there are male specific pressures in society that some of these studies don't really go over. A lot of males feel pressure to be stronger or be bigger and or be more lean and have this ideal body that a regular disordered eating survey might not pick up on. So here's just an example of the female athlete triad. It's what a lot of health professionals use to, and it is a valuable tool to diagnose some females with these disorders and help them. But like I said, it's counting out a lot of the population. And problems with research language, which some of these studies cited, was that athletes, the questions are framed towards being skinny or lean, which reflects problems that female athletes might face. They might ask an athlete, do you feel pressure from your coach to lose weight or to be thin? And there might be a male athlete that he's not satisfied with his body and he's feeling pressure from maybe his coaches to put on muscle mass or something, and he's going to answer no. Meanwhile, he's engaging in some disordered eating behaviors and he'll have a false negative on his test. And so one of the studies, what they did is they kind of changed the vocabulary to be more directed at male athletes and reflect these pressures, and they saw some really improved results and higher scores with male athletes. And there's also problems with athlete perception, where because it's not an issue that's talked about or brought up, a lot of male athletes don't realize that they have disordered eating behaviors. And so a study done with cyclists was some of these, they interviewed some cyclists and they were very aware that there are disordered eating behaviors and eating disorders in cycling, in professional cycling. And many of these athletes actually show these behaviors, but when asked, they were unable to recognize the behavior in themselves. And so what I initially thought when going to this research, and what a lot of these researchers thought, was that maybe a male athlete might only engage in disordered eating if they're pursuing excellence, or if they're trying to better themselves, so they're maybe their diet's too restrictive. But actually they did some studies and results were really non-conclusive. So athletes did score high in perfectionism, and athletes are at a higher chance for having an eating disorder, but they didn't find any causation. These athletes who wanted to achieve perfection actually weren't always the ones who were having disordered eating. And like I said, the male and female athletes have different social pressures. Female athletes do feel pressure to weigh less and be lean, and some male athletes might feel that pressure too. Typically, though, they feel pressure to be more muscular. And so there are some really interesting studies being done around this what's called drive for muscularity, which is basically a drive to be more muscular, stronger, bigger, and look more like these athletes that we revere so highly in society. And these athletes are well outside of what's normal, even in the elite athlete population. And so again, drive for muscularity is defined as attitudes and behaviors focused on increasing muscularity. Sports pressures predicted these muscle building behaviors. So sports pressures could be pressure from a coach or a teammate, or from what you view in sport, to weightlift, or to have a certain diet, or even to take performance enhancing drugs. And perceptions that an athlete has a lack of muscularity is related to sadness, shame, and depression in those athletes. And drive for muscularity, again, has been linked to performance-enhancing drugs, exercise dependence, which is basically if an athlete feels the need to constantly exercise to maintain a physique or maintain a certain level of fitness, and also has been associated with disordered eating. So again, drive for muscularity associated with this culture of hypermasculinity, just these huge, strong athletes, and just in the media and television, things we see that really aren't always possible. And so athletes feel pressure from teammates and coaches, and that's really the leading cause for DM, drive for muscularity. And negative causes of that are the same as the causes of eating disorders in female athletes. It's feelings of shame surrounding your body and your sport. So again, coaches and peers are actually, they found not perfectionism to be the largest factor in development of disordered eating. So basically all the people surrounding an athlete are those that influence them the most. And all of these studies that looked at that suggested education of coaches as a solution to that. And so coaches being more aware of these issues in their sport. So I'm going to show you a video of an athlete he's a professional track and field athlete who had, just before this interview, or recently, broken ties with a coach who has been kind of controversially known for having his athletes on an extremely rigorous training program that involved supplementation for reducing body weight, and which I think is very unhealthy. And you can kind of see just his attitude towards his body with a few of the things that he says.
Days where one foot's in, one foot out. You're all the way in. Diet. I've really changed my diet. I'm eating much healthier now, and I'm actually heavier. I'm about 130, whereas last year I was about 122, 123. So, yeah, you know, I'm happy to hear you say that because I'm feeling big. But a lot of changes. And
so if you couldn't catch what he said, he mentioned that he changed his diet, and Dorian O'Ray he's not a small guy. I think he's maybe 5'10". To weigh 122 pounds is pretty extreme. And he said now that he's at 130, which is maybe a more healthy weight for him, he's feeling big. And so he's still having the effects of having a coach and maybe teammates with causing kind of negative impact on his body image. So the practical application for all this, again, is that coaches and teammates have the biggest influence on athletes, and blanket observations I don't think they should really be acceptable anymore. Just to say that, oh, he's a male athlete, he doesn't face, he shouldn't have problems with his body, whether he wants to be smaller or bigger. Those observations just shouldn't be acceptable. There are some consequences of having a negative body image for males, and this is resulted in taking dangerous drugs or having dangerous, unhealthy diets. And another application is that I think there's a lot of educational and research opportunities, like this drive for muscularity piece, where it's a very new field, and I think there's a lot to be seen with athletes in that. And just the importance of mental health in sport. Fortunately, recently there's been more of a focus on that in collegiate sports and professional sports, and hopefully that helps athletes with their self-image and body image. Summarize, there's large gaps in current research due to years and years of being focused on a small group of female athletes, and the research that we do have on that is good. I would just like to see it maybe broadened to all types of athletes and to male athletes. And like I said, this drive for muscularity piece, I believe, shows a lot of promise. And if you take away one thing from this whole presentation, just I would like you to take away that those surrounding an athlete have the greatest impact. So if you're a teammate or a coach or an educator, you can influence that athlete the most, and hopefully do so positively. So any questions? Yep.
So male-specific pressures, coming from a background having a single mother and dealing with that, are they really male-specific?
What I mean when I say male-specific pressures is our society. So we have what we consider like female-specific pressures, which is pressures to have a certain feminine physique, skinny physique, whatever the media is saying is, you know, the best or sports or whatever. And so there's pressures for males to be a strong, big, you know, lean male athlete like LeBron James that athletes are facing, and there's not really research that is focused towards that. Yeah.
So you mentioned anorexia, bulimia, and binge eating disorder.
Mm-hmm.
Is there any association with kind of like body image shame and among athletes specifically? And forgive me, I always pronounce it wrong, either pica or pica. I can't remember.
I'm sorry, I actually haven't looked into pica. Can you remind me what that is?
Oh, it's basically it's the eating of non-nutrient providing sources. So people that eat clay, toilet paper.
Okay, yeah. I didn't come across anything with that, but that would be good to see. That's where I wish there was, because I'm sure there is a lot in the general population studies of pica and eating disorders. You know, people eat ice chips or whatever to try to crave that hunger. And I really wish there was more research for male athletes for things like that, because there are so many things that there's not any research available. Yes?
So Brian, are you familiar with the recent IOC, International Olympic Committee, position statement and research that comes out? Because it feeds right into what you're trying to get at, is include males versus just females. They've now taken away female athlete triad.
Oh, really?
And kind of opened it to everybody.
Okay,
It's
that's
called
great.
REDS.
No, I haven't.
Restricted eating, energy deficiency in sports.
Okay.
And it's very multifactorial, so they also bring in the mental side of it too.
So yeah, I didn't know that, but that is good that mental health is trickling into other parts of the sport, and especially at the elite level.
Yeah, and they really wanted to take out, it's not just a female thing.
Yeah.
Even though, as you point out, that's where most of the research is. So it,
Yeah, and
you know,
even
hopefully that will help open the field to male
and even open the
athletes.
field to other female athletes aside from those just affected by osteoporosis and amenorrhea.
Right.
Yeah,
right.
that'd be
Yeah.
great. Somebody else?
So you talked about elite athletes, this being a condition in elite athletes. Do we have any evidence that it might not be only in elite athletes, but people just dabbling?
Yeah, I
Age
think
groupers?
I did come across a lot of research that was for general population or high school athletes or people just sports people, people with an active lifestyle. I just chose to focus on elite athletes because with my career path, that's where I want to go, is coaching at an elite level. But there is some research being done in that field, and there are they're trying to get more mental health professionals with younger populations to curb it at a young age before athletes are either just not an athlete or an elite athlete, you know.